Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Iowa State Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I am Levi Stevenson. You can see my socials down in the bottom left-hand corner there at Levi RSTV and at Wide RT Natty LT. That is on Twitter. It's very similar. It's the same type of handle on Blue Sky as well, and basically other social platforms. We are here again this week to talk about the Iowa State Cyclones, as we do every single Tuesday. This is a live Q&A session, so if anybody in the chat has any questions that they want to ask and have answered throughout this hour, we definitely appreciate all that. To get started off, a couple big things that we were going to talk about today. We've got multiple Iowa State coaches being interviewed for NFL jobs. Matt Campbell was rumored to interview with the Bears, and Noah Pauley did interview, as it was confirmed by the 49ers that he interviewed with them earlier this week. We'll talk about those a little bit. There's not actually really much of anything there, but it's worth noting. And then we've got a couple Cyclones playing in the playoffs right now that are doing important things and some important developments this week for other Cyclones in the NFL. And I just kind of getting caught up on this recently, but I did not catch originally that with Iowa State winning over Iowa in swimming and diving, that was enough to wrap up a second Cyhawk series title for Iowa State in 3 years. Interestingly enough, 2 of the last 4 have been ties, and then the COVID one before that was obviously canceled. So good accomplishment there for the university. So that's always a nice one to win there, because the in-state rivalry with Iowa is obviously a critical one for the state, and just it's a nice one to win because we don't like Iowa. Let's talk a little bit about the coaches that interviewed or were rumored to have interviewed. Matt Campbell was the first one to get floated it was a Bears insider with the Chicago Tribune that floated that the Bears were interested in talking to Matt Campbell. This is already, in just within a few days, this whole thing had subsided, and I think Iowa State fans are pretty used to the whole Matt Campbell getting rumored for other jobs thing at this point. But it's one of those where if it's the NFL, you're at least like, oh, okay, that's interesting, because it's not the first time he's been connected to an NFL job, and jumping up to the NFL is different than bouncing around to a different college job, especially now. So you don't completely ignore it, but I think for the most part, everybody knew from the beginning that Matt Campbell was not going to be the Bears' first choice, and even if they were, it's far from a guarantee that he would even take the job to begin with, just because of the situation, and he loves being a college coach. So it's not necessarily a natural fit for him to go to the NFL, just because he likes to be a developer of young players, and you can't really do that as much in the National Football League. So that's already pretty much subsided. Looks like the Bears are now looking at maybe Mike McCarthy now that he's out in Dallas. There was Ben Johnson was connected with him for a little bit. There was Joe Brady. There's a lot of names going around for Chicago, but Matt Campbell is no longer one of them, which is good for Iowa State on multiple fronts. Obviously, the main reason is because you keep Matt Campbell. The second reason, though, is that as long as Matt Campbell keeps getting connected to NFL jobs, that's a good thing that shows everybody else that you still have a coach that other people want. Other people wanting, especially NFL teams, wanting to interview your coach to come, coach their football team is always a good thing. But definitely glad to have Matt Campbell back on the sidelines for what will be his 10th season in Ames. The other one, which was interesting that I don't know if anybody really saw coming, was Noah Pauley, Iowa State's wide receivers coach and passing game coordinator, interviewing for the 49ers offensive coordinator position. Now, once again, this was kind of a nothing thing. I don't think he really ever had any realistic shot at getting it, mostly because he, unfortunately, just because of how it works, he was an interview candidate to satisfy the Rooney Rule in the NFL, which is that for every NFL coach opening, you have to interview a minority candidate as the main candidate for it. Um, so Noah Poly was likely used to fulfill that requirement, especially considering that Kyle Kubiak had already been sort of informally named the offensive coordinator. And when they did that, they violated the Rooney Rule. So they had to go back and retroactively interview a minority candidate, which Noah Poly satisfied. But the important part here, though, is that there are lots and lots of minority coaches that they could have called to interview for this offensive coordinator position, but they talked to Noah Poly, and that is a reflection of Noah Poly's reputation within the coaching community, which is that he is absolutely considered one of the up and coming stars in the football world in general. Just like much the same as like Nate Sheelas is now with the Rams after coming up, through the ranks at Iowa State. So Matt Campbell keeps finding his coaching tree is quickly widening. You've got Alex Golish, who is, he was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee, and then is now the head coach at South Florida. I think, you have him, you have Nate Sheelas of the Rams, you have Tom Manning in the NFL with, I believe he's with the Colts, or he's a position coach in the NFL. I don't remember if he's with the Colts or not. Then you have like DK McDonald was in the NFL for a while and is now the defensive coordinator at Kansas. And then you've got Noah Poly coming up through the ranks. Tyson Vite is now the defensive coordinator at Cincinnati. The Matt Campbell coaching tree keeps spreading fairly quickly, especially for how young Matt Campbell is. Excuse me, I want to grab a drink there. It's a pretty impressively wide coaching tree he's established so far, and it's going to continue to get wider because I would imagine we will see Ryan Clanton. If Ryan Clanton continues to improve the offensive line and then that offensive line again eventually takes off, I can't say I'd be shocked to see if Ryan Clanton got a job someplace else. Defensively, on defense, I guess maybe Hank Poteet would be the one that maybe would move on, but Deion Broomfield's an Iowa State alumni. John Haycock's probably just going to be here till he retires. Eli Rashid would be potentially in line to get the defensive coordinator spot when John Haycock retires. Whenever that is, I don't think it'll be this offseason, but whether it's this year, it's in 5 years or whatever. You would think Eli Rashid would be a front runner to get that defensive coordinator spot. So, you would think he would probably stick around because it seems like he also just really likes being the defensive line coach. I don't think you're really worried about anybody leaving on the defensive side of the ball, but the offensive skill positions and Tyler Roll did a very good job coordinating the run game this year. Wouldn't shock me if he got a big time running backs coach spot in the NFL. If he got a running backs coach spot in the NFL, or if he got a shot as an offensive coordinator at a small school, at an FCS school or something like that, wouldn't shock me. Though coordinator in the FCS is debatably maybe below position coach in the FBS, especially the Power Five. But maybe he gets an offensive coordinator spot at an FBS or at a G5 school maybe. But point is, though, having guys like Noah Poly interview for really big high profile positions like offensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers is certainly notable. And I think that's a good way to measure whether or not Matt Campbell's putting together good staffs, is if other places want your assistance. So very, very pleased to see that stuff. Did reach out to our Discord, to the Wide Right 90 Light Discord chat a little bit earlier, just to see if anybody had any interesting questions I wanted to go through. Let me see if I've got anything here. Freddie wants to know if there's any rumors of the spring portal. I haven't really heard anything because right now we're kind of in that in-between spot where we've got the winter portal pretty much taken care of. Spring portal, I mean, you're looking at that's after spring practice, in March. So in March and April. So, I haven't heard anything right now, but like guys that I would say there's maybe the guys that I would look at and say, okay, maybe a potential to transfer if something doesn't work out. It's tough. Maybe you're looking at like an Andrew Keller, I think, at tight end, who came in as a fairly highly respected recruit. And he was pursued, I believe, by Wisconsin and Iowa. He had some good offers coming out of high school, but for whatever, for one reason or another, whether it's injuries or it's just guys in front of him, has just not been able to break through on the depth chart to this point. So Andrew Keller would be a guy that I'm not saying he will or anything like that, but he would be a guy that I would not be shocked to see enter the portal after spring practice if he does not step up. Just given that Brent Bramer's back, and you'll have Tyler Moore back, which Tyler Moore maybe is a guy that maybe he transfers. Gabe Burkle coming back. You have two solid guys there, and then Cooper Alexander, who has hurt a decent chunk of this year, but he's a guy I know that they look at as being pretty being a high end of prospect here. Like, did I miss something? And Andrew Keller actually already transferred. Did I miss that? Because he's not currently listed on the Iowa State roster. He's showing, I mean, I don't know, like 247 saw him at Iowa State, but he's not. I don't believe he's listed on the roster here. Oh, there he is. Okay, I missed him. Yeah, so Andrew Keller, he will be a redshirt junior next year. So if he wanted to transfer to get 2 more years of playing time and try to get out from underneath Ben Bramer and Gabe Burkle and potentially Cooper Alexander, I can't say I'd be shocked, and I certainly would not blame him there. See if there's any other guys on this depth chart that you could be potentially looking to move on if they don't really get a notable jump on the depth chart this year. Maybe you're looking at, let's see. I don't really see anybody in the second. I'll just pull this up and just share my screen just so I'm not talking blankly at something else. Let's see here. So zoom in a little bit. I'm looking in the defensive backfield here. Your expected starters here: Jamison Patton, Jontez Williams, Jeremiah Cooper. Miles is gone, Malik is gone, Darren Porter is gone, Cam Smith. I think we'll have a shot. I think he'll have a shot at being on the 2 deep next year. He had a couple rough snaps this year, but I think that's a guy that they expect to take a jump. Matthew Bess, I don't know a ton about. Maybe that's a guy that might transfer for some playing time, might transfer down for some playing time. I don't know too much about Matthew Bess. Bo's gone. David Coffey is just a freshman. Tayshaun James will be back. I would expect he'll be near the top of that 2 deep. He had a couple nice games to finish the season, especially against Miami and Kansas State. Miami, Kansas State, and in Arizona State, he had some nice plays. Kaijon Cummings Coleman is a true freshman. All the true freshmen I would assume will get, true freshmen going into being sophomores will be back, unless they're way just like scout team, just are not getting anywhere on the depth chart, and then maybe Matt Campbell or Deion Broomfield just say, hey, just straight up, there's not playing time for you here in the future unless something really dramatic changes. So I would recommend that the transfer out, something like that, not push them out, but just say, hey, for your own career, I might suggest looking to see if there's a spot for you elsewhere, type of thing. A defensive end, got Miles Mendezun, Samuel Same. They'll definitely be in the mix to be starters next year. Kenny Yogu is the same way. A couple of these guys are walk-ons, Chet Andrews and stuff like that. Zamir Hawk played a bunch this year. Jace Gilbert, I think, is a guy that they expect to take a pretty big jump this offseason, so I would expect to see him pushing the depth chart. J.R. Singleton's gone, unfortunately. He had such a good career. I remember when he came out of high school, I was looking at J.R. Singleton, and I was like, okay, this is an interesting guy. He was kind of a low to mid 3-star guy, and just seemed like a guy that could have easily gotten buried and just stayed on the scout team forever. But shout out to that guy for putting together just a really, really nice, just a great career. A couple of these other guys here, Dominic Orange coming back is just massive. You got some other guys down here that are, Xavier Hamilton. These guys, you'd like to see them step forward a little bit, but we'll see. They've got a little ways to go. Plus you've got some new guys coming in, maybe along the defensive line, you see 1 or 2, but linebacker is going to be the interesting one to watch because you've got so many guys coming back that have starting experience that there's just straight up, there just isn't going to be snaps for everybody that maybe has earned them. You're looking at a guy, Zach Levitt, who was hurt a lot this year and played good snaps in 2023, but he was hurt a lot this year, so he didn't get to play a lot. And Cale Brazina played really good snap. He'll be in the two deep. I would assume probably starting, depending on how they're going to do their rotations a little bit, but he'll be one of the first four linebackers for sure. Jacob Imming is a guy that he just hasn't been able to stay super healthy. I know this is a guy that they think can really still break out. Carson Willich played some this year, but got hurt again. He'll be there. He'll be available. Maybe a guy like Jacob Imming just decides to transfer just so he can get some playing time somewhere, before he ends up having to medically retire just because he keeps getting hurt. John Klosterman is a guy, he played some decent snaps last year, but when you're looking at the top end linebackers for next year, is he in the first 6? I don't know. Does it matter? Is the first 9 really the relevant group of linebackers for Iowa State? And are they going to rotate 9 guys? It's certainly possible. I would, you can assume that Brazina and Willich and McLaughlin and Bacon and Sadowski, that's 5. I would be shocked if Bo Goodwin's not involved. That'd be 6. God, you'd think, Cooper Ebel, 100%, 7. You'd think Mason Miller would be in there for, an 8th, maybe. Ryland Barnes played a lot of good snaps this year. That'd be 9. You can get 9 there without even including Zach Lovett and Jacob Imming. You've got 11 guys probably. I would say at least 11 guys coming back that you can look at linebacker and say, these guys have started games or played a ton of snaps. And frankly, we saw this year that having 11 guys on the roster that can take snaps is good, and you just might play because injuries happen. But is that going to be enough for, is Danny Inglis going to stick around? He was a guy out of Ohio in this past class that I know that the staff was really excited about. Is he a guy that's going to stick around and be okay being the 12th linebacker on the roster? I don't know. Maybe he is. I'm not saying he won't be, but it just depends on how they're going to try to configure the roster with these roster reductions. Yep, Chris just chimed in and is exactly right. This is a big key in this, is that with the reduced roster sizes, you're going from 105 to 85. You're going to see a bunch of these guys that are just straight up not going to have roster spots just because there's just not enough spots available for some of these guys. The Angelo Jacksons and the Caden Cooks and the Carson Van Dinters of the world, Mason DeBravas. I don't know that there's a spot available for them at Power 5 football programs just because the rosters are so tight. Now, is it good? They can probably find spots in lower levels, FG5, FB, FCS, maybe Division 2, whatever it is. But, can you realistically carry 12 linebackers on a roster, on an 85-man roster? Maybe, but you're certainly not going to have, I don't think you can carry 12 linebackers on an 85-man roster. I don't. And unfortunately, a guy like Ryland Barnes might be, the shitty part is Ryland Barnes has earned a spot on this roster, but is there room for him? Is he one of the 9 best linebackers on the football team? I don't know. I don't know if he is, maybe, but I don't think you can keep 12 linebackers on an 85-man roster. I just don't think that's not even, it's not realistic. I think you have to be at 9, basically. And unfortunately, a guy like Ryland Barnes might be at the short end of that stick. Now, the good thing for Ryland Barnes is he played a ton of good snaps this year. There will be a G5 or maybe an FCS. Maybe it has to be an FCS just because the G5 also has to go down in roster size. There will be an FCS program or a G5 program that will take a flyer on him. G5 would be kind of taking a flyer. The FCS, I would think he put on enough good snaps this year where he could kick ass at a UNI or something like that. And you hate to see a guy like that put in good snaps in the Big 12. Um, you hate to see him like have to drop down to FCS just because of roster sizes, but he might not have a choice. A guy like Rylan Barnes, Zach Lovett, Jacob Imming, I don't think those guys are going to be available to stick around. It sucks, but I just kind of think that's where we're at with these roster sizes. I'm sure as we get going, they'll figure out a recipe for how they want this roster breakdown to look. But this 3 long snappers on the team, this is never going to happen again. You will never see 3 long snappers on a roster ever again in your entire life. They're going to pick one of these guys. My guess is they'll probably pick Jacob. They'll probably pick Drew or Drew. They'll pick one of the Drews, I would imagine. And they're just going to roll with that because you can't afford to have three long snappers on the roster. You can't have 3 kickers. You can't have 4 punters. It's just not an option. And it sucks, but yeah, I don't know. It's just not great. So if you keep looking down the road here, down at the offensive, no, I guess I should say it's not 85 men. Now that I think about it, it's 105, right? 12 linebackers on a 105 man roster is doable. Let me just check. I want to make sure I'm not talking on my ass. So the new scholarship limit for 24-25, or sorry, for 25-26. Oh, it is 85 players. The overall roster limit will be expanded to 105. Okay, so the scholarship limit remains at 85, and the overall roster limit goes to 105. But right now, I think there isn't a limit on the full roster. I don't think, as far as walk-ons, and like you can have 120 guys in the program if you want, including walk-ons. But I think I'm not exactly sure, but either way, can you really justify having 15 linebackers in the program? I don't know if you can. Offensive line, I don't know if there's anybody that's got a spot wrapped. I mean, Brendan Black probably has his spot pretty much wrapped up for 25. Dylan Barrett probably does. I would say those 2 have spots for sure. Maybe Trevor Burr. Probably Trevor Burr. I would say those 3 are fairly easy plugins. But I think everybody else here has a shot at being involved in the first 5-man in the starting rotation. So I don't think you'd see too many guys transfer out, just because I think you're always going to have a shot at it. We already saw Keegan Shackford leave the program. It'll just be Kyle Conradi. I would imagine Kyle will be the only kicker on the roster next year. To me, if you are keeping multiple scholarship specialists at every position, and I just think that's a mistake. I mean, the nice thing is that if you lose, you'll pick a punter or kicker. Usually the other one has done that also previously. Like, I would be shocked if Kyle Conradi did not punt in high school, or could be taught to punt fairly quickly. Maybe you keep one dual specialist on the practice squad, but you're not going to see, teams have 3, 4 kickers anymore. Quarterbacks, I kind of wonder if they'll come down to 4 quarterbacks, because next year you'll have Rocco, Connor, and Alex Mansky on the team, but I don't maybe they'll carry one more on the practice squad. Like, I don't think you'll have 5. I think you'll probably carry 4 most of the time. So I would guess they'll probably drop at least one spot. Yeah, maybe you lose Major Cantrell or something like that. But Major Cantrell or Wyatt Boehm, I would guess one or both of them will probably not be on the roster going into next season. Running back, I think, because you're losing Jalen Jackson. You're not going to keep all these guys. You'll keep Dylan Lee, obviously Dylan Lee, Carson Hansen, Abu Sama, assuming he doesn't change positions again. Don't have inside information, but I think he would be a candidate to flip to corner. Either way, Abu Sama is an athlete you keep on the team. Whether he's at running back or corner, I don't know. But either way, you have those 3 guys for sure. And you have the new freshman coming in. Does Aiden Flora look for another place to play? I don't know. Maybe. Because he did play some snaps this year and he looked competent. He looked like he belonged in the FBS at minimum. Could he go to could he go to a G5 school? Maybe go to go to a Northern Illinois or an Ohio or something like that and be a 1,200 yard back or something like that. I think he showed he can be capable of doing that. But, beyond that, I don't think Aiden Flora is ever going to be a 10 carry a game guy at Iowa State. There's just too much talent in front of him. Yeah, tight end, I think Andrew Keller would be a guy that I would look at possibly, moving on if he doesn't get a spot, just trying to preserve his health and get as many snaps in his college career as he can. Wide receiver, obviously you've got a few guys coming in. Daniel Jackson, if he decides to come back, good on him. I think he'll certainly have a spot, or he'll certainly have an opportunity to be a starter. If he can play in the spring, then we'll see. I can easily envision a world where spring practice happens and he's not necessarily an out and out starter. And he just decides, I've been injured so much. This is going to be my last season. I want to make sure I can play and get as much out of it as possible. Maybe he transfers to UTSA or something like that to go back home. Maybe something like that happens. I don't know. But I hope he sticks around. Daniel Jackson's a talented guy. He just had such bad luck, and I wouldn't blame him at all for trying to get whatever he can out of his last season. Kai Black is an interesting one. He's played some snaps, but just not a lot. And he's going to have a really big spring if he wants to have a shot. If he wants to have a shot at really playing later down the road, like you see here, 2023, he redshirted and saw action in two games in special teams. And I think in 2024, I think we saw him. I mean, yeah, he caught one ball against Arkansas State. So like he hasn't played much at all the last 2 years. If he doesn't break into the top, 9 receivers this coming season, can't say I'd blame him or be shocked if he decided to go elsewhere. And I feel bad talking about guys like this, like they're just expendable. But unfortunately, when you're reducing roster sizes and you're talking about, Iowa State's trying to play playoff college football here on out. They're trying to be a playoff team or push for a playoff bid most years. I think is a goal that the program has. I think that's a pretty reasonable and fair goal too, just given where Iowa State is and can be. But you just look at like guys played, you had guys play last year, Dominic Overby and Brett Eskelson, and you had you had Carson Brown come out of nowhere and play a ton of snaps and was starting by the end of the year. You had guys jump up ahead of Kai Black and just never saw anything out of him. Plus you got Eli Green and stuff like that people are expecting to be in the mix this coming year. There's a lot of names in that receiver room that you look at and say, okay, does Kai Black have an opportunity to jump over these guys? Michael Parks is in there. He's another guy. Very big NCAA football, very big college football 25 guy. Michael Parks is a guy that shows up in your second season that is pretty effective. But, I don't know. We're gonna have to see. I think we're gonna find out a lot about what this reduced roster size is gonna how it's gonna shape the depth charts and the balance of positions going forward. I think we're gonna find out a lot about this coming spring after this spring practice and in that spring portal. Unfortunately, like I said, guys are gonna have to go. I mean, that there isn't room on the roster to have all of the new freshmen and everybody that was already planning on coming back. There's just too many. There's just too many guys for enough roster spots. So people are going to have to leave, which means you're going to see people get in the portal that you are like, damn, I really, really liked him, or I thought he played really nice snaps last year. Like, gosh, the one that I keep looking at that I'm like, this would suck, but I can't say I'd be like blown away is a Rylan Barnes because he played so well last year. Maybe they've got a spot for him and maybe he'll stick it out. But I don't know. It's tough to predict it's tough to predict anything in college football right now, but especially this. I just not sure what to do with it. So uh good question though. Good question as far as spring portal stuff. That's something we're gonna have to monitor more as we get into March and April. So let's see here. I did get a request for a way too early top 25. I don't I don't know that I'm ready to go there quite yet. One, I want to wait till the playoff is over. Because it seems silly to put out a way too early top 25 before we even are done with the spring portal. So I think I'm going to save that one for after, maybe we get into the middle of April and we're past the spring transfer portal window. That's when I'll give my too early top 25. But I think right now, I think you're just, I don't know. I think you're just, it's a weird exercise, especially because right now I'm not even sure. I haven't done anything too much with it. Maybe I'll take a crack at one for next week. But one thing I did get an interesting request for though was to examine how Iowa State would have matched up with each of this year's playoff teams. And I think that is what we're going to do next week. I'm going to go through and match up Iowa State against SMU and Tennessee and Clemson and Penn State and Oregon and all these other teams and just see how I thought Iowa State could have contended. I don't know that I'll spend too much time on Arizona because we saw that and it was a bad time. So, but it's what's funny about Arizona State though is I think if Iowa State's even a little bit healthier, like you've got everybody, you got all the linebackers and defensive line back except for Caleb Bacon. And maybe Malik Verdon is healthy enough to actually do something. I think Iowa State actually matches up with Arizona State pretty well most of the time. I just think Iowa State's injury problems were compounded and Arizona State was the aggressor and they had Cam Scadaboo and all this. But I think Iowa State can match up with Arizona State a lot better than it did last time. But, we'll explore that maybe next week and the week after. Next week for sure. Maybe if it bleeds over into the week after, we'll keep talking about it. But I think that's going to be the next thing here is the next series is to look at how Iowa State matches up with each of those playoff teams. Another one, guys, any updates on how we can access the trophy to toast our own Pop-Tarts? I know the trophy is on display. I think it's in the Jacobson building. Do they have it plugged in? I would doubt it. I would love to do that. I'd tell you what, I don't know exactly who I'd reach out to about it. I kind of want to try it. Like, I want to just like throw a Hail Mary out there and see if somebody will let me make toast a Pop-Tart in there. And if I can somehow get somebody to let me toast Pop-Tarts in that trophy, I will make sure to get video of it. Chris says, let's talk about moving to the 4-2-5. Okay. So there's a couple interesting schools of thought here. I know last season we heard a lot last season that they wanted to move to not necessarily move to a 4-2-5, but they wanted to use more 4 down fronts for the defense. And I do believe that was intended to be the plan. However, The guy that was going to probably make that all work was Caleb Bacon, who had extensive experience last season as a stand-up edge rusher. Um, and even maybe even an edge rusher that had a a hand on the ground, a decent chunk of snaps. He was a versatile edge rusher that you can move around to either side. You can have him up or down, whatever you wanted to do. As soon as he got hurt, I think that kind of blew that plan up. Now you lost you lost a guy that could be an outside linebacker, could be a middle linebacker, could be an edge rusher. You lost that piece. So then you just had defensive linemen and linebackers. You didn't really have a lot of guys, a lot of other linebackers on the roster that were like a really high end pass rusher. We saw guys later in the season like Bo Goodwin do a little bit of damage off the edge, but like Cooper Ebel did a little bit, but for the most part, I would say didn't really do a lot of damage in generally in the pass rush at all. It was a very bad pass rush, but we really didn't see it, especially from the linebacker position. They really didn't take a lot of risks there, especially later in the season. I think they took a few more once the guys had more snaps, but when Caleb Bacon was down and Will McLaughlin was still not back, they were very, very conservative, the linebackers. When you have, true freshman Rylan Barnes and true freshman Caleb Bacon, and you've got Bo Goodwin and all these other really super young guys out there running a linebacker, you don't want to get too exotic because you want to give them something they can easily process and easily in a system they can easily play in. So I think Caleb Bacon going down early in the season probably blew up the idea to go to 4 down sets for this year. That said, you obviously have Caleb Bacon back for 2025. So take a drink real quick. I think the idea of going to more 4 down sets is still very appealing to try to generate more pass rush, help out your secondary, which won't be as experienced as it was in the past. You're still going to have Jeremiah Cooper back, but you're going to lose Bo Freeler and Malik Verdon and Miles Purchase and Darian Porter. So you're losing your 4 of your 5 best secondary players. You're losing those. You feel good. You feel good with the guys that are replacing him with Jameson Patton and Jontez Williams and stuff like that. Guys that played tons of really good snaps last season and in previous seasons. Tayshaun James had a nice finish to the season. You feel good about those guys, but they're not true /redshirt seniors that have played a million snaps in their career like Bo Freeler and Malik Verdon and Miles Purchase have. So you don't want, if you can generate more pass rush with your extremely experienced linebacker group and not have to put as much pressure on your secondary, I think that's very much a winning formula for Iowa State going forward. And especially being able to, be more creative with the linebackers will help them defend the run better, which, defending the run this season was a huge problem, partially because there was lots of freshmen that just didn't know where they needed to be. Some of that should be fixed just by virtue of them having a lot more game tape to look at and having a lot more snaps a lot more experience under their belt. That should help that quite a bit, but being able to generate a pass rush and hurry up quarterbacks a little bit more will definitely, improve things quite a bit on the defensive side. So I think that's certainly an option they will continue to explore as long as they have the guys to do it. And now that you have Caleb Bacon back, I think they will continue to explore that and keep trying to work that into the game plan. I think it makes a lot of sense for the league as the league in general going forward. The league is much more run heavy than it used to be. And the 3-3-5 is still a good system. It is. And generally speaking, it's done a good job defending the run, even while it is, primarily designed to stop air raid offenses, but it's done a good job of slowing down run games. However, a lot of the teams that we see now that have really good running games focus a lot of their running game in their passing games really around RPOs and option schemes. And the 3-3-5, it can be vulnerable to option schemes, read options and things like that. If your linebackers are put in conflict a lot and they're not ready to make that decision, you can run into issues there. And that's what we saw with Kansas, with UCF, we saw it with Texas Tech. We saw it with Arizona State, where they're running lots of RPOs and read options and things like that. You can still be an effective run stopping team running the 3-3-5, but you're not playing with a hand completely tied behind your back, but you're making it a little bit more difficult. Like the 3-3-5 is built to stop offenses that are just not as common in the Big 12 anymore. So I don't think you need to go away from it because it's still kind of your bread and butter and it's still the core of your system. And it's gotten there's the old sayings, dance with the girl you brought, dance with the girl that brought you type of thing. And I think that I mean, it has some merits because it's a system that you've run forever. Everybody knows how to run it. Everybody from the top to bottom on that defense, from the staff all the way down to the walk-ons, know how to run that defense. So there's something to be said for it. And it has still continued to be a good defense. But there's also the other side of that sword. There's the other there's the other edge of that sword where you need to adapt or die, like to a certain point. And the Big 12 just isn't the league. It isn't the league it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, really. It's just not the league it used to be. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, what we're doing wasn't working anymore, or it's not working as good as it could. Let's do something different. And that's the thing too. And Chris is right here too. It's the effectiveness has dropped off a little bit here. It's time for a change. So the effectiveness has dropped off partially because teams have figured out how to attack it. Like it's not like it's not like it was in 2017 and 2018 where teams just had no idea what to do with it. And they just didn't know how to attack it. They do know how to attack it now. So now it becomes down to execution, comes down to experience, and it comes down to comes down to the offensive coordinator calling the right plays at the right time type of thing. And other teams are getting better at attacking our defense. They are. Like if you watched how Texas attacked the 3-3-5 in 2019, 2020, 2021, even when we beat them, they still had a very good idea of how to attack Iowa State. And that was, in the 20 to 30 yard range down the sidelines, there's a soft spot there. There's a soft spot over the middle, in the deep middle, right behind the linebacker. There's a soft spot there. There's different spots that other teams have figured out how to attack. And, other times Iowa State does a very good job of covering that up by mixing coverages around and moving guys around and bringing exotic blitzes and whatever it is. But, it's a defense that is not catching anybody off guard. Everybody knows how to play against it partially because it was so good, 5, 6, 8 years ago, it was so good that everybody started running it. And when everybody starts running it, everybody starts to figure it out because they have to. And not only is it just other Big 12 coordinators that are having to figure it out, but now you have NFL offensive coordinators that know how to attack that 3-3-5. So the book is out on how to attack Iowa State's defense. It's just a matter of, can you do it? And a lot of times when Iowa State has a chance to match up that defense one-on-one with the other offense, a lot of times Iowa State's going to be successful with it because Iowa State is better at running their defense than other teams are at attacking it. But that gap is closing every single year, just like Chris said. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're changing it too late. We don't want to have to do a 2017 thing again where you're switching the defensive scheme in the middle of the season. We don't want to have to do that. Ideally, you can anticipate that ahead of time and start, switching it in the off season, and then you slowly work it in over the first couple games and then go into it and have it ready, have it 100% ready to go by, the third game of this, third game of the season. And then you're really cooking with gas by the time conference play starts. I don't know what they're going to do exactly. I think they still do intend to move to more 4-down sets as long as they have the guys healthy to do that. But we'll see. It's an interesting point. I know it was a big talking point last offseason. I expect it will be a big talking point again this offseason. It would not shock me if once again, coming out of spring ball, going into fall camp, we start hearing more rumors, you know, coming out about them wanting to run 4-down sets and stuff like that. And they'll come out at the same time as we hear rumors about is like, oh, this guy's playing really well. This guy's got the staff really excited, all this. It'll come out at the same time as that kind of stuff, right around media days, whatever it is. So it's one of those things where we're just gonna, unfortunately, we are stuck waiting until next August when Iowa State takes the field in Dublin, Ireland against Kansas State. That's the first time we're gonna find out really what they're gonna try to do. And I don't know how they're going to attack that Kansas State game, because typically not only do you not play Kansas State this early in the season, you normally play them in November, um, but you're not used to playing conference games this early in the season either. You're used to playing North Dakota or Arkansas State or whoever you're used to playing an FCS opponent this first week of the season, and now you're getting Kansas State. So they're getting thrown into the deep end right away, which I think is an interesting wrinkle. So, are they going to, you can't, in this game, this time next year, in this Kansas State game next year, you can't afford to get off to a slow start. You can't afford to have those hellishly slow starts that we see in those FCS games. Obviously, this past season we saw them chuck a deep ball in the second play of the game, and that was that. But, are they going to try to be aggressive? How are they going to mitigate the slow start? Because having a super slow start against North Dakota is one, where then you can eventually just out talent them and it doesn't matter as much, is a lot different than having a slow start against Kansas State, who is a very technically sound football team. They're, every bit as talented as you are, and they can punish you a lot more for those slow starts. So I'll be curious to see how they attack that. That's something we'll definitely dig into that more as we get into the summer and June, July, and whatever else, and start doing opponent previews and all that. So it'd be interesting to watch. But I think the 4-down set stuff is going to be, it's absolutely going to be a talking point this offseason, just like the offensive line always is. I think the offseason talking points this year are going to be the same as they always are. It's 4-down front, offensive line has a chance to be best it's ever going to be, best it's ever been. Things like that, we're gonna see a lot of that same type of stuff. There's a receiver that they want to just get the ball in his hands in space, and they just know they need to get the ball in his hands type of thing, and they want to see the running game be more consistent. And they're looking at Rocco for being more accurate and whatever. We're gonna hear the offensive storylines, or the off-season storylines. I think are going to be very predictable for this year, for this off-season, which is. After the 2023 offseason with the gambling probe, I will take a predictable and quiet offseason going forward. That's something you took for granted, having the boring offseasons where nothing happened. And now you're okay with that happening after the 2023 season, where you have all that. Kind of fun little aside from that, speaking of that 2023 gambling probe, is that Hunter Deckers is now eligible for the NFL draft. And I just saw a tweet a little bit ago from John Gruden has Hunter Deckers and the kid from Miami, Ohio, in his his QB camp room or whatever, where they go over film and all that or whatever. So I guess shout out Hunter for making the best of his time at Iowa Western and giving himself a shot at the NFL. Be interesting to see. I'll be interested to see what kind of hype he generates. Be interested in seeing that anyways. So good on him either way to make the best of a bad situation, I guess. It's too bad it didn't work out here, but I'm not going to say it hasn't worked out for Iowa State. You got Rocco back now, and they just won 11 games in a Pop-Tart Bowl over Miami. So that's certainly nothing to scoff at, but good on him. One other thing I want to touch on before we wrap her up for this week is I think we saw last night in the Vikings Rams blowout, really, where we saw Sam Darnold fall apart. I think Sam Darnold might have inadvertently made Brock Purdy a little bit more money. I think a lot of people thought Brock Purdy was going to get a pretty good paycheck this offseason, 40, 45 million or something like that. Sam Darnold showed the world that, because Sam Darnold played well this season, well enough to get him in the 40s. But he showed yesterday, and really, the last two games really, that he's not as good as Brock Purdy. There's a reason he did not start in San Francisco when Brock Purdy was there. And people are showing that. So if Sam Darnold can command 40 million, 45 million this offseason, Brock is going to be easily into the fives. I would not be shocked to see 55 million be his number going into next season. Somewhere in the 50 to 55 million range, I think, is where Brock's going to be. Maybe him, I don't know, maybe he's at 60. I don't know. But 50 to 55, I think, is where he's going to end up being. And the main thing I'm going to see from the I want to see from the 49ers, though, is I want to see if they're going to defer that money like the Chiefs did with Pat Mahomes, and like more and more teams are doing now. The Dodgers did with Shohei Ohtani. The Mets are doing it with Juan Soto. If they're going to defer that money to try to rebuild that roster, because Christian McCaffrey is getting older. He's hurt all the time. George Kittle's getting older. Deebo Samuel's getting older. They've got a couple really good young core players. Fred Warner is still young and still very, very good. Still one of the best linebackers in the league. They had a couple of Trey Greenlaw had a nice season. They've got some pieces around there. Juwan Johnson has been a reliable target for them. They've got good Ricky Pearsall's another one. They've got guys in the building that can win, but their top end stars are getting old and they're hurt all the time. Right now for a while there, it was Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel were their two best players, but neither of them can stay healthy ever. So I don't know what they can do about it exactly, especially Christian McCaffrey, because he's a 30-year-old running back. 31. He's going to be a 31-year-old running back. He's Christian McCaffrey, but he's still 31-year-old running back. So I don't know what his value looks like as far as trading or anything like that. I don't think they're going to trade him. I think they definitely need to look at trading Deebo Samuel. Unfortunately, he's probably going to get traded to the Chiefs or the Eagles or something stupid like that. And they're with rich are going to get richer. But the 49ers need to be aggressive in the free agency to help Brock out. They need offensive line pieces in the draft. They need to get him targets, healthy targets in the offseason, whether it's in the draft or in free agency. They need to help out Brock Purdy. So I don't know if they're going to try to defer some of Brock's contract to help clear up some space there, but it'd be interesting to watch. So, chat, if you've got any other questions, please, go ahead and throw them in the chat, throw them in the comments right now. I'll be more than happy to answer anything you got. Even if it's not Iowa State related, whatever it is, if you got any questions at all, I'd be more than happy to take those right now. Otherwise, we're going to get it ready to wrap it up here in a couple minutes. Chris says Brock should take 40 a year and have the Niners put it back in the roster. Honestly, I think you're dead on. I was talking to Matt Van Winkle about this. I was texting with him a little bit, and I said he's not going to do it. But if I were Brock, I would take 30 million. Take 30 million and tell them to put the rest into the roster. Put the rest of it into getting him targets, getting him offensive linemen, whatever he needs to be successful. Do that. He won't. The Players Association may not let him do that, because Brock taking 30 million would potentially just reset the QB market down, which has like never ever happened. In the Players Association does not want that to happen. Brock's agent does not want that to happen. There's a lot of people around Brock Purdy that do not want him to take $30 million, even if Brock wants a better team around him and the 49ers want to get him as cheap as they can. There's a lot of people around them that have influence that are not going to let him take a low number. But if I were Brock Purdy, I would take 30 million, 25, whatever it is. $30 million in 1 year is more than enough for him and his grandkids to retire upon birth. That's generational wealth generated in one single season of pay, and he'll still get it over a few years. But I think Brock should take a lower number and give the 49ers every opportunity they can to keep a good roster around him, rather than try to go through a whole rebuild. You use Brock, rather than using Brock's rise to his prime and then his prime for a rebuild. Keep the roster competitive now, and get some young guys in the draft, get some young offensive linemen in the draft that you think can play early, and get some targets for him. They're still a playoff team. I mean, like if the 49ers were healthy all season, they're still a playoff team. They're probably at the top of close to the top of the NFC this year, if they're healthy. But they were not healthy. Trent Williams is old. They need to replace him. So they need to get some new guys in there to help out Brock. But yeah, so alrighty. Well, I think next week we're gonna do what I was talking about earlier. I think I'm gonna go through and analyze we're gonna analyze Iowa State against this year's playoff field and see like how do I think they would have matched up against SMU or Penn State or Texas or Georgia or whoever. You know, how do I think Iowa State would have stood against those teams? I think that's an interesting question to ask, and I might bring on a guest to help me work through that a little bit. So everybody, I appreciate it, you all watching, and I will see you all again next Tuesday here on Iowa State Cyclones Live, same time, 7 Central, 8 Eastern for any of you out on the East Coast. And we will see you then. Bring your questions, bring your comments. Would love to see those, and gives me more stuff to talk about during the stream. We love to see the engagement too. So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you again next week.